Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a really dramatic journey into one of the most compelling and, let's be honest, controversial narratives shared across the Abrahamic faiths. The story of Prophet Lot, or Lut. This is a truly deep dive because we're not just wrestling with this high-stakes theological drama.
Yeah.
We're putting it right up against some pretty surprising archaeological evidence that seems to confirm the physical destruction described in the scriptures.
It's a fascinating intersection.
So our mission here is to try and achieve some clarity and balance. We're going to unpack the Quranic account, specifically from Surah Hud.
Right.
Then we'll analyze the major textual differences that really set the Islamic version apart, especially around the status of Lot as a prophet.
Which is key.
And finally, we have to examine these truly startling scientific claims emerging from the Jordan Rift Valley. We want to synthesize what archaeology reveals and what the Quran teaches that corrects and purifies older traditions.
And it's so vital to start by establishing that this story, it wasn't new when the Quran was revealed in the 7th century.
Okay.
The Arabian Peninsula was already thoroughly familiar with the tale and with the physical ruins. These cities, they're often referred to in the tradition as the Aika, the ruined settlements, and they lay directly along the established Quraysh trade routes.
So this is something people would have known about firsthand.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about the atmosphere. Every caravan heading north to Syria or Sham would pass by this desolate, mineral-crusted landscape near the Dead Sea. It served as a constant, stark, physical reminder of a cursed people and divine judgment. The whole area was just notorious.
So when the Quranic revelation comes, it isn't introducing an unknown story, it's speaking into an existing knowledge base.
Precisely. And because of that context, the Quran served two primary functions. First, it was a confirmation of the historical truth, that yes, these cities were destroyed by a divine command.
Right.
But second, and this is theologically far more crucial, it provided a correction. It corrected details that, in the Islamic tradition, were seen as corrupted or altered in previous scriptures.
It's a purification of the story.
Exactly. A purification of the prophetic tradition, ensuring that the character of Lot's chosen messenger was maintained to the highest possible standard.
Okay, so let's unpack that core narrative then. We're drawing mainly from Surah Hud, starting around verse 69. And it sets up this narrative contrast from the very beginning by starting with Prophet Ibrahim. The story opens with these angelic messengers visiting Abraham, first to give him the good news about the birth of his son Isaac.
Right, a moment of immense blessing.
But then Abraham learns the angels are on their way to destroy Lot's wicked cities. And he, ever the compassionate intercessor, he pleads for them. He tries to argue for mercy.
But the decree is final. And that scene is so essential. It immediately establishes this contrast, right? The fate of two prophets, two households.
You have Abraham, rewarded with blessing and lineage, versus Lot,
a righteous man trapped in a land of complete moral darkness. So once the angels, who appear as handsome young men, arrive at Lot's house in Sodom, Prophet Lot is just. He's immediately overwhelmed with distress.
And he knows exactly why. The people of the city, they quickly gather into this terrifying mob, rushing his house, demanding access to his guests.
And that's the moment.
This is where the full extent of the systemic moral decay of that society is just lit bare. It's a scene of intended violence, of coercion.
That mob scene, it reveals the primary theological purpose of the revelation. It's a powerful moral warning.
A warning about what, specifically?
The catastrophic consequences of systemic corruption, of arrogance, and the complete rejection of divine law, what we call the fitra, that natural moral order. When a society rejects that, and the sanctity of hospitality, the consequence is certain.
And beyond that moral lesson for the community, it also provided this essential consolation for Prophet Muhammad. This was revealed during the late Meccan period when he was facing just intense persecution.
Exactly. It's reassurance. The message is clear. Look, the best of prophets, people like Lot and Abraham, they faced rejection and ridicule.
Yeah.
But their righteousness was ultimately affirmed.
And the punishment itself is described in this horrifying detail. The cities are turned upside down and rained upon with stones of baked clay, or sijil.
And that specific description, baked clay, becomes incredibly important when we get to the science.
Right. So let's go there. The geography, the era. We're talking about the Middle Bronze Age, roughly 1900 to 1700 BCE. And the location is the infamous Cities of the Plain in the Jordan Rift Valley, right near the Dead Sea. This isn't just a desolate place, it's a huge geological fault line.
And for decades, that was the assumption. Archaeologists figured the destruction must have been from a massive earthquake, which are common there.
But that's not the latest theory.
Not at all. Recent investigations focused on sites that were suddenly and completely devastated in that exact era. They proposed something far more dramatic. And the strongest candidate is this massive urban center known as Tal El Hammam in Jordan.
And that's where the science gets, truly mind-bending.
Yeah.
The Tal El Hammam airburst theory. It connects cosmic physics directly to the scripture.
Precisely. So excavations led by Dr. Stephen Collins, they suggest this large, thriving city was destroyed around 1650 BCE.
Which is right in the historical sweet spot.
Perfect timing. And it wasn't destroyed by war or an earthquake, but by a cosmic airburst. You have to think of it as a small asteroid or a comet fragment that enters the atmosphere and explodes thousands of feet above the city.
Like the Tunguska event in Siberia.
Very similar, but much, much closer to a major population center. And the evidence they found is just staggering.
Wait, I saw a figure like 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit. That sounds less like a rain of stones and more like a localized nuclear event.
That's the core of the convergence. The archaeology demands an extreme heat event that no Bronze Age technology could create. They found melted pottery, mud bricks vitrified into glass, metal fragments just gone, and the smoking gun, tiny fragments of shocked quartz.
And shocked quartz only forms under extreme pressure, right?
Exactly, like a cosmic impact. The blast zone, they estimated extended for miles, and the sudden temperature spike, briefly hitting over 4,000 degrees, would have incinerated everything instantly.
So what about that specific description in the Quran? We made the highest part of the city its lowest and rained upon them stones of hard clay. How does an airburst cause that?
The physics match up perfectly. The initial explosion creates a colossal shockwave, faster than sound, that hits the city from above. It flattens it, it shears off the upper stories and roofs,
Causing the highest part its lowest.
There you go. And the mud bricks, the pottery, all the building materials, they would have been subjected to temperatures high enough to melt them into this glassy, molten material as they were thrown into the air.
So the debris falling back down, it wasn't just rock, it was literally raining droplets of melted, vitrified building material.
The stones of baked clay.
Yeah.
The sigil. Absolutely. And what's more, the immense heat would have vaporized nearby dead seawater, sending plumes of salt and brine into the air.
And that would have salted the earth.
It salted the entire Jordan Valley plain, rendering the land toxic and uncultivable. And this is crucial because the archaeological record shows the area around Tal El Hammam was abandoned for over 600 years after this event. The land itself was cursed. It's just a compelling synthesis of geology, physics, and scripture.
That really does ground the historical event. Okay, let's pivot sharply from the physical catastrophe to the theological one. The two most critical areas where the Quran and the Book of Genesis diverge, both dealing with lost daughters.
Yes. We start with controversy A, the offer to the mob. In Surah Hud, verse 78, Lot desperately confronts the mob and says, "Here are my daughters, they are pure for you."
Yeah, and critics, both ancient and modern, they seize on this. Why would a prophet offer his own daughters to a bent on sexual assault?
And this is where Islamic tafsir, or exegesis, steps in to resolve what seems like a moral dilemma and protect the integrity of prophethood.
The daughters of the nation interpretation seems to be the preferred one.
It is. It holds that Lot was referring to all the women of the city, not his biological children. As their prophet, all the women were symbolically his daughters. He was urging the mob toward the lawful, pure institution of marriage as the alternative to their demands.
So it's a call to morality,
Not an offer of sacrifice.
No.
A prophet has to uphold the highest moral standards, making that literal offer impossible. The second interpretation, even if it was his biological daughters, sees it as a powerful rhetorical challenge.
How so?
He was offering lawful marriage a path to purity, to shame them. By rejecting that lawful offer, they prove their only interest is violence and transgression, which just solidifies the necessity of their punishment.
So the core point is that this offer isn't an ethical failure on his part. It's a tactical move to expose the depth of their corruption.
Precisely. And that connects perfectly with the theological concept that prophets are masum, divinely protected from committing major sins.
Okay, now, if the historical event is the same, why is the post-destruction narrative so radically different? Let's talk about controversy B, the incest allegation, which is only found in the book of Genesis.
This is where the corrective nature of the Quranic narrative really shines. Genesis 19 describes that after the destruction, Lot and his 2 daughters hide in a cave. And the daughters, believing they're the last people on earth, conspire to get their father drunk on 2 consecutive nights and conceive children with him.
To preserve their lineage, this results in the birth of Moab and Ammon.
Yes.
And the Quran, importantly, is entirely silent on this.
Absolutely silent. And Islamic theology rejects this story in its entirety. For Muslims, the idea of a prophet, a man chosen by God to exemplify righteousness, committing incest or drunkenness, is theologically impossible. Lot is Masum.
Now, critical scholars often suggest this whole cave story was an etiological myth. Can you break that term down for us?
Sure. An etiological myth is basically a story created to explain the origin of a specific people, often in a negative light. In this case, the story was most likely created by ancient Israelite scribes to slander their neighbors and military rivals, the Moabites and the Ammonites.
These were powerful kingdoms nearby.
Very powerful. So by claiming their ancestors, Moab and Ammon, were born of incest, the scribes were essentially dehumanizing them and justifying hostility toward them.
So it's ancient political warfare waged through genealogy.
Exactly. It had nothing to do with Lot's actual character and everything to do with delegitimizing their rivals. The Quran's narrative, by omitting this, restores Prophet Lot's character and affirms his purity as a righteous prophet, free from this later politically motivated slander.
You know, this story faces significant ethical criticism today, particularly about the collective punishment and questions of intolerance or feminist ethics around the daughter offer. You can't just gloss over those concerns.
No, we have to address them impartially. Critics argue that the collective punishment appears disproportionate by modern standards of justice, and that's a legitimate difficulty when reading ancient texts through modern ethical frameworks.
So how do scholars, both classical and modern, address this complexity without just dismissing the critique?
They emphasize context and the systemic nature of the transgression. The sources are clear that the punishment was for more than just individual moral choices. It was a result of systemic corruption, arrogance, and the institutionalization of injustice.
It wasn't just one sin.
No, the texts highlight sexual violence, forcing themselves on travelers, highway robbery. The community had descended into total lawlessness, coupled with the arrogant rejection of the messenger sent to warn them.
Point of no return.
That's the idea. When a society reaches a stage of persistent, violent transgression and totally rejects the divine warning, meaning there is no hope for reform, then divine justice is meted out. It's seen as a necessary consequence.
And the exclusion of Lot's wife is a crucial detail here, isn't it? It underlines that idea of individual accountability.
Absolutely. Lot was saved, but his own wife perished. She sympathized with the city's evil. This powerfully demonstrates that salvation isn't based on blood ties, but is entirely individual, based on your conduct and belief.
So after bringing all this together, the prophet's character, the archaeology, the moral warnings, what are the core values for you, the learner, to take away today?
Well, we see the supreme importance of hospitality and protection of guests, which Lot nearly sacrificed his life for. This was a cardinal virtue. We also learn about divine justice, that evil, when it becomes institutionalized and violent, has an inevitable consequence.
And finally, that requirement of moral courage, of standing firm in your convictions, even when you are, like Lot, standing almost completely alone against an entire civilization.
To summarize this synthesis, we have a powerful theological narrative preserved in the Quran that restores the Prophet Lot's character. And that narrative finds plausible, tangible support in the archaeological and astrophysical record through the Tol el-Hammam airburst theory.
It really is a profound convergence of faith and physical evidence, science, and scripture. The story of Lot is ultimately a tale about accountability and moral steadfastness. And that raises an important question for you, the listener, as you reflect on this deep dive. If the destruction of the cities of the plains serves as a warning about the societal cost of systemic moral decay, what defining forms of pervasive violence, coercion, or total rejection of moral standards could constitute the point of no return for a civilization today? And what is the personal cost required to stand up against it? That's a powerful thought to carry forward. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive.